Okay, we do have the council does have a number of contracts with some large providers of emergency accommodation. They weren't taken out under our administration, we inherited them, and they're long-term contracts, which you know, will stay their course, if that makes sense. When those contracts come to an end, that's our opportunity to think again. We will, yes, I agree, if we could bring it in-house, it would be better. You know, that would be definitely better. We've started a small way to do that, so we are converting some of our existing properties and bringing them in-house to provide emergency accommodation. And we'll look to do more of that. The demand is huge, though. I mean, that would be a huge programme. We are realistically still going to rely on the private rented sector as well. And there's numbers of different ways of doing that. In terms of the emergency accommodation we do have, there has been some work that's been done with Just Life, which is an organisation to try and support people who are in our emergency accommodation. If there are issues with you know, problems with accommodation, then they can complain and those repairs get done, so that process does happen. But on the revenge evictions, I think it's a really difficult one, because I think there are some landlords who do take advantage. The people in emergency accommodation are just on a 24-hour lease. If there are genuine issues with antisocial behaviour, fair enough, but I think it's sometimes borderline, which is of concern within the city. But we are doing what we can, but it's a slow process when we have, you know, the demand for emergency accommodation is going up because of all the issues I just mentioned earlier in terms of the housing crisis. So some of the solutions are complex and they're big and they're not an easy fix.
Thank you, Claire. Our members at Acorn, we're just everyday people, and our power comes from pooling our collective knowledge to try and find practical solutions to the issues that we're dealing with as renters. And one of those issues does come down to people being scared of revenge evictions. So what we do quite a lot of is what we call member defence. That's helping our members with issues with their landlord, whether that be deposit theft, landlords not doing repairs or threats of eviction. And we try and negotiate with the landlord, and if possible we'll take collective direct action. We actually mobilised over 30 people yesterday afternoon to deliver a letter to Geneva Properties in Hove, a landlord who's stolen a deposit. But one problem that we do always have is people knowing that they can be evicted at any time. So people are scared to complain about their problems. So what we are trying to do is organise eviction resistance teams. We chose our first campaign at our launch event on Tuesday, and we unanimously voted for that to be a campaign to stop universal credit evictions. People in the city, as universal credit is being rolled out, there's potential there to be in rent arrears, which could put them at threats of eviction. We're having a meeting in here on the 27th at 7 p.m. to plan that campaign. We're going to try and get the council to agree that they're not going to pledge they're not going to evict anyone over universal credit arrears, housing associations as well, and private landlords. And if necessary, if we hear of any universal credit evictions, we're going to mobilise eviction resistance teams to stop those evictions from happening.
First of all, let me start by saying what a wonderful policy the council have on evictions, on universal credit and so on, which is they already have a policy of no evictions. They've introduced it on the bedroom tax and have done it on the universal credit. So although I'm highly critical of many things, although officers have sneaked one or two through, the policy is brilliant. Emergency accommodation budget, temporary accommodation in the hostels and so on, 20 million a year is spent. But then we find hidden away in the budget, next Thursday, is another 5.5 million for commissioning the contracts under integrated commissioning. And I'm afraid the contracts have been agreed under Labour. In the first year, there were, I think, four or five contracts were extended, and you're actually criticised by the auditor, the external auditor, because they'd been signed off by officers without the approval of councillors, and it was a major criticism. A lot of the emergency accommodation should just be taken over, should just be bought and run by the council. It may not surprise you to know that a great deal of the accommodation is not, there hasn't been due diligence carried out by the council in terms of ownership. You can, when you check a company, you can find out who are the persons of significant control with Companies House by a press of one button. I asked through FOIs, or the coalition asked through FOIs, whether the council does this. And an officer said, no, we don't check. We only do that if councillors ask us to. When you ask a councillor, they hadn't been told you had to ask. And yet we have places like Percival Terrace, that many of you may have heard of, that is owned by two people through the British Virgin Islands, and goes back to the largest centre of tax evasion in the world, a little island called Niue in the Pacific, which is just offices. It's not only Percival Terrace, they own other properties. So money is going, say 20 million roughly, every year, not helping the local economy, and it's ending up in the British Virgin Islands. And you can check some of it with some of you may have heard of the Panama Papers and so on. It's all the same companies, and our council is doing deals with those companies who are quite openly guilty of tax evasion and of taking money overseas. I really think we have to do something about it as a matter of urgency, and it's got to be done in a public and an open way.
I'll kind of stick straight to what the question really was, which was about emergency accommodation. In the last couple of weeks, we've actually had some meetings with agencies that are running and participating in emergency accommodation, and there's at least 20 people in emergency accommodation who are malnourished. So I don't know how to... Malnourished means they don't have any food, they don't have the ability to go to food banks, the agencies don't have any budget or any facility to give them food. I don't think it can be anything any more basic than the fact that they don't have a packet of rice, and if they did have a packet of rice, they don't have a pot to cook it in, or they don't have a cooker, and that's the type of accommodation that's been described. That's coming from a mixture of places. It's coming from the landlords not providing correct facilities. You're getting rooms that are converted by putting a wall down the middle of them, so you've got 2 rooms, double the rent, but they don't have any power. So the minimum they can have in there is a kettle. There's no way of them cooking any wholesome meals. But on the horizon, hopefully, is the ability where we're going to go back to a very simple Meals on Wheels. Using volunteers and some of the, almost like a delivery service, because we see it as a crisis. We don't see it as a political game. It's a crisis, and let's do it now and worry if we're getting things right or wrong later. Let's at least give them a meal a day. And it's not a huge amount that we're aware of now, but I'm pretty sure that it's the tip of an iceberg. Food banks have increased. We run a small food bank that supports people after they get into accommodation, and it seems to be working with the guys that have been on the street 25 years, and they're now 10 weeks dry, sitting reading their books, watching TVs. We gave them the books, we gave them the TV. I'm sure you've seen us on Facebook asking for TVs and radios and stuff, so it's just a bit practical really, but I think the council really needs to get to grips with the condition that it's paying huge amounts of money to it. These landlords are taking huge amounts of money and offering a minimum service. The council are desperate, so they're allowing it. They're desperate because they see the amount of people in the street. They're desperate, so therefore they're not checking it. And I think it really, again, it's a practical